Good afternoon, everyone. We're almost at the end of this conference, and hopefully we'll have a chance to catch up in a lot more details afterwards. So my name is indeed JP. You might wonder, what do I know about agility? And obviously not enough. I think we're all life learners when it comes to that. But I am in fact responsible for the Vistaprint Agile transformation. I am also responsible for a number of technical functions, for example, software release management and various teams in technical operations. I too am a first-time visitor in Tunis. I am super excited. It is beautiful, the weather is amazing, the people are a lot of fun, the food, delicious. And when I got here Saturday, I got a chance to catch the last few minutes of the football match between Tunisia and Guinea, right? Yay, go Eagles, right? Do we have anybody else watch the match? Raise your hand. Yeah, keep your hands raised, keep your hands raised. Anybody else big fans of Les Aigles de Carthage? Any fans of other football clubs? Yeah, football fans at large? All right, pretty good crowd. And I bet in a stadium you're probably pretty good at the wave, right? Whoa! I don't know if it's a thing around here. I think it is though, right? The purpose of this conversation today, of this talk, is for us to share with you how we have gone about our own Agile transformation. I feel like I've learned a lot about who you are. We had a lot of learners, Scrum Masters, managers, doers, who either currently work in Agile environment or aspire to be in an Agile environment. So is it fair to say that several of you are already in some form of transformation or other, either at the very beginning, a little further? Like, show me real quick, how many people are in some form of transformation? Okay, a few. Hopefully there is going to be something in our story that will resonate with you. Things that are similar to your environment. That's my goal anyway. For that to make sense, I feel like I have to tell you a little bit about Vistaprint. So you may know that we're manufacturers and sellers of custom printed products. If it can be printed, chances are we sell it. And if we don't sell it yet, we will soon. We are well known for our business cards, but we have well over 100 different product lines. You may be interested that we sell uniquely through an e-commerce website. We sell to 16 million customers plus every year, and we do this supported by 5,800 employees around the world in 26 locations. The reason I'm saying this is not just because I'm really proud of Vistaprint. Of course I am. But I want you to start to get a sense of scale and complexity, because you too may well work in a complex, large environment. Let me tell you more about the kind of skills that are present at Vistaprint for us to turn our ideas into customer value. So I mentioned a big website. So of course, we have the full complement of software development skills, data analytics, marketing, graphic design, creative, translation, business, product management, and so forth. So we have that. I'm sure many of you do too. But we also have over 2,000 people in our customer care department, several hundreds of whom work right here in Tunis, just 15 minutes down the road from here. And those folks are amazing at empathy. Not only do they answer questions from our customers, but they also provide design services. If somebody has an idea for a product, but they're not really handy with a computer or with drawing pictures, we will help them. The other kind of skills that we have within the company that you might find interesting, because maybe you have them, is manufacturing. At Vistaprint, we have our own plants distributed around the world, where our manufacturing wizards turn these customer concepts into physical products. High quality, amazingly affordable products. So, if you're in e-commerce, graphic design, if you have marketing, data analytics, if you have software development, if you have manufacturing, if you have customer care, maybe there is something in our story that could be inspiring to you. Why did we want a transformation in the first place? Right? What's the problem that we were trying to solve? Well, Vistaprint has grown very fast, from tens of people in the early days to hundreds, and by 2013, several thousands. one of the downsides, one of the things that we noticed was that the speed at which we could convert ideas into customer value was going down. The way that we explain that in lean or agile terms, and here I want to define a little bit of vocabulary, is that the speed at which our ideas were going through our value stream was going down. Value stream is simply the list of all the activities that your people undertake to turn concepts into customer value. Make sense? So we had this feeling, the executives were thinking, man, I feel like we were faster when we were smaller. How could we be faster while having a lot of people so we can bring more value to the market? So the first step that we did was to actually assess the situation. We did some measurement. We looked at several of our past large enterprise projects, and we measured the time that it took to go from concept to cash. And that hit us hard. So we looked at a handful of important ones, and we measured that several of them took anywhere from 18 to 30 months to bring those ideas to market. Does that happen to anybody here, that it can take a little while to bring ideas to market in your organization? It's sad, but it does happen. So how do you think we felt about that? Do you think our executives were happy about this? Not so much. And not only were we not thrilled about that, we were also a little bit puzzled as to how to change it. Now, we knew that at the time, with about 4,000 people on board and then a lot of ideas floating around the company, that this was going to be a big task. A huge task, so much so that we started to call it our elephant. That said, we had a lot of energy. We were really enthusiastic, and we knew that with enough time and energy and effort, we could fix that. And so we were tremendously enthusiastic, right? We were going to eat that elephant come hell or high water. But we knew there was a risk. And the risk here is to try to tackle too much at once. And then if we were to try to swallow the whole thing at once, we might feel very sluggish and be hampered in our progress. So we had to devise an approach, find a way to tackle this thing in a manageable way. Does that make sense? Right? Anybody embarked into large projects that, slow down after a little bit? So that's what I want to talk about. And I will explain everything in due time. So the first approach that we decided upon is that we were going to operate based on a pull system rather than push our ideas upon people. What this means is that we were going to be working with people willing to engage with us as coaches rather than impose our ideas upon teams who were not ready yet. Why pick the battle from day one when you can start to make progress with people who are in a place where they're able to work with you as coaches, right? So we wanted to do that first. Second thing, we decided that before we talk to people about changing the way they communicate, collaborate, and coordinate with one another, we were going to educate them. A lot like what we're doing here today. It doesn't make sense for them to change the way they work if they don't understand why. And so we embarked on a lot of education. And I'll give you some concrete examples later. But you've actually just lived through a few today, right? Between what Mario and Antonio have done. Next, some of our coaches, like Mario and like Antonio, have a lot of experience. They can go into a team and have a pretty good guess as to what they could do to make their lives better. But they try really hard to not tell them. Instead, they work with the team so that the team itself can define some experiments that the team can try to change its way of working. Let me ask you as to the reason why. Do you tend to believe more into an idea that you come up with yourself, or in the idea of someone else that tells you what to do, right? It's pretty straightforward. You tend to be more vested in the success of your own ideas rather than that of someone else. Next principle. We're faced with thousands of people, just a few coaches. Should we work with a few teams very deeply, or should we try to work with everyone and move them all in lockstep? We chose to go deep. So we call that depth first before breadth. We'll touch upon that later. Finally, why are we doing all this again? Is it because we're lovers of Agile and as long as it's Agile, it's good? Nah. We're trying to move business metrics. And in our case, it's the lead time of ideas to market, right? The speed through the value stream. So the lead time again. That's going to be our main metric. Now, if you take a step back, well, I can't take a step back here safely, but if you do, you'll notice here that what we're doing is really applying agility to our Agile transformation. Mario talked about applying incrementality. That's exactly what we're trying to do. If we are to eat our elephant, we need to carve it in manageable bites. So far, so good? All right. I would like to illustrate that with a few examples, if I may. But first, a sense of the timeline. So we started all this in 2013, a small team of 4 people with executive support to start to change things about. One of the first things that we did was to get the assistance of an outside consultant who had some experience with all of this to augment our internal capability, and we immediately started working with a few teams who were willing to do so. Right? They had a lot of courage and they were willing to take some risks with us. About a year later, in 2014, we had enough results now in the small that the CTO of the company said, all right, for all of technology now, I would like everyone to start their Agile journey. And for the rest of the company, of course we will help you, but it's totally optional. A year after that, in 2015, one of our coaches, David, had his first high-level success with a team completely in a different context than information technology. It was a team in a marketing and creative department. And I will explain that in more details later. But on the strength of that success and other successes elsewhere in the company, in 2016, our team of executives decided that, you know what, Vistaprint will become an Agile company. So please, everyone in all the department, start your journey. It is no longer optional. And today, here we are, October 2017, and we crossed another big milestone just a few weeks ago. Mario talked about earlier that if you are going to transform an enterprise, it's important to know what the priorities are so that people can get aligned, so that we can define common goals and we may collaborate better. So we have defined such a system. We have defined an enterprise-level Kanban board, and we are now on our 3rd version of that just-in-time corporate planning system. What's so neat about this latest version, and it's not only the 3rd version of it, but it is the first one that is owned and operated by non-Agilist coaches. It is owned by our strategic department, which is really awesome, and they're doing a beautiful job of it. I did promise some examples. I probably should deliver on that. So put yourself in our shoes. It's 2013. We just assessed that we need to change. We know our value stream is very complicated, right? From gathering customer requirements, sourcing products, building the website, finding a way to build the physical products, selling them, and then answering customer questions and providing support. We have about 4,000 people, so we're like, okay, well, let me see. If a coach can help about 100 people, we have 4,000 people, therefore, hey boss, can we hire 40 coaches? What do you think the answer was? No, not a chance, right? What can you do with, I don't know, 1? And then show me some results. So indeed, that's what we did. I mentioned that we hired some consultants. That's how we started, in the small. Over time, as we delivered some results, as the belief that this could really be transformative for us, we started to hire coaches. Some externally that came in fully experienced, others that we started to form internally through the education that we're going to talk about in a moment. Over time, the teams that have started to transform how they work, they noticed that there was a role that was very useful, that they themselves advocated for. The role of an Agile facilitator. Those of you who work in companies where you do Scrum, you know that role as that of the Scrum Master. Early on, it was not really an official role. It was just actions that someone would take. And then over time, as we recognized this pattern from team to team to team, we formalized it. So you see how we deferred commitment again to creating a career path, to creating new job descriptions, to educating managers on how to lead Scrum Masters. We deferred all that until we saw the need for it. So now our capacity, the driving force to promote this transformation, increased. More recently, after having talking to hundreds of people across the company, we noticed that we had a number of folks who are unbelievably passionate about agility. They're super eloquent in their arguments. They're very influential, but they do have one big problem. They have a full-time day job already. And so they are not available to move about the organization from team to team. But they can help us promote a lot of change locally. We call those people the champions. And we've noticed them in all of our offices. Of course, also here in Tunis. We have a lot of them right here in the room, I'm sure. I see a lot of faces, in fact. And so finally, we became clever enough to bring these people together, provide them with support, and today they are an incredible lever of change for us in the enterprise. They do some basic Agile introduction and training, they can educate people on specific techniques, and they can even help the human systems. What I mean by that is they will help people do retrospectives, team formation, and so forth. Looking at the sum total of all that help that we're getting between consultant, coaches, facilitators, and champions, we have now more driving force through the company than we ever would have if we had simply hired these 40 coaches from the get-go. These people are far more passionate. And we've done so incrementally. We ramped up our transformational capacity as we delivered some results. Again, that incremental mindset applied to the transformation. I said that education was another big cornerstone approach for us. I want to describe that a little bit and how we approached it incrementally as well. In the early days, I remember the first team that I have worked with, they said, JP, come here, JP. We need help. We want to apply Scrum to our work practices. I was like, okay, do you know what Scrum is? They're like, no. I'm like, I know it's not a problem. I can show you. And so I taught them the basic mechanics of Scrum. Then, of course, I realized that they had not yet seen the Agile values and principles. So I did very much the same thing that Mario did with all of us a little bit earlier today. I taught them that. And then over time, there was a whole sequence of different techniques that they wanted to learn about. Can we learn how to size? Can we learn how to craft user stories? How do we do better retrospectives? You know, so on and so forth. They were building their toolkit and their toolbox, while we, the coaches, were building our library of different types of education. And we did that step by step as the needs arose. Over time, after we worked with lots and lots of teams, spoke to lots and lots of managers and executives, we recognized that the same kind of people tended to benefit from the same kind of education, right? The doers, team members, people with hands on keyboard, people who are not overhead, unlike me, right? I'm pure overhead at the company. Those folks needed a certain kind of education. Managers, they tend to need something a little bit different. People who work very closely to customers and capture requirements and showcase the products, they tend to need something different as well. So we created longer, fuller, more involved programs called pathways. These are simply cohorts of 8 to 12 people that we bring together about once a week for a period of 10 to 16 weeks. And we really immerse them very deeply in agility. They have to do a ton of reading. They participate in discussions as a group. We ask them to run real experiments in their own teams, and then we force them to write about it so that they can start to teach, train, and influence others. To date, we've had over a dozen such cohorts of education. And so we've deeply educated over 100 people across the company, I think in almost all of our offices. And that has made a huge difference. I'm not saying this because I think we're so awesome at education. I'm explaining all this to show you how we've proceeded incrementally. Some of us had the suspicion back in 2013 that someday we probably would need some kind of deeper, more explicit, fuller program. But we wanted to avoid the big upfront planning mindset. And so we only included in our pathways those topics that our stakeholders told us were the most valuable. And that's how we know they're effective now, because they've essentially been tailored for every stakeholder. I talked about deep coaching, and I owe you a concrete non-technology example, right? Let's talk about that. I said that we chose an approach where we would rather go deep with a team rather than go broad and shallow with everyone at the same time. But what does that mean? Well, here's the basic process that a coach will employ. A coach engages with a team that has said, hey, we would totally benefit from some help, right? That's the pull signal. First thing a coach does is to go with the team and assess the current situation. What is the team doing well? Where they are struggling? What kind of results they're getting? Doing some interviews and doing some measurements on their business outcomes. The coach then presents that back to the team and to the management, because without management support, things get very difficult, right? It's difficult to cause change if management is not there to support it. Fundamentally, change is scary, right? And so you need a little bit of courage to go through that. Once support is secured, then we start education, because we really want to start changing how people work, but we can't do that without educating them. It's not fair. But then quickly thereafter, the team starts to come up with experiments. They might have some ideas. I think if we did X, then our workplace would be better. Then try it. Even the most resistant person tends to agree to try almost anything for a short period of time. And so it's through that process that the team evolved how they work. The coach, of course, works with the team on a day-to-day basis so that they can catch little teaching moments here and there, right? That's very important. And then on a regular basis, ideally on a short period, the team, the coach, the managers, they get together, they look at the road traveled, what they have done together, and they ask themselves, do we like that, and do we want more of it? And so that is the cycle of continuous improvement inside the team. So that's the theory of it. Here's an example. So Coach Dave engages with a team that is responsible for producing email campaigns, right? We're an e-commerce company. We sell through a website. Email is one way that we talk to our customers. In January of 2015, this is a small team, and this project is much smaller than that which we talked about early on, right? When I said 18 to 30 months, we're talking about enterprise scale projects. Here we're talking about team scale project. So in that team, when we did some measurement, on average, it would take 40 days between the time that a marketer said, you know what, it would be awesome if we had an email campaign to our customers about, let's say, a topic like Halloween or New Year's or something. 40 days before the emails go out. I am seeing some puzzled looks. You're like, JP, that sounds crazy. Emails. 5 minutes, send, right? What's up with that? Well, here we have to remember that we're talking about big email campaigns that go to millions of people. And those are emails that are translated in well over a dozen languages. So there's all that translation process. There are also emails on which we measure the effectiveness, a lot of data analytics. So we do multivariate testing. So there's many different versions of the emails. And we get to measure how many people open the email, how many people click the links, and so forth. And then finally, the content of those emails is dynamic. So this means that our customers, when they open them up, they see content in there, graphics, text that pertains to them personally, their previous purchases, their company logos, and so forth. So I still think 40 days is too long, but it's still a little bit more complicated than just typing a quick email in 5 minutes. But the point is that Coach Dave and that team got together and they went through these steps week after week for a few months. By the month of May of that year, they had already cut down their lead time by almost 3. Right? Months of effort, but look at the difference. That was pretty amazing. Because once the team starts to see better results, the energy level goes through the roof and they want more and more. It becomes amazing. After so many months of going through this, the coach thought, you know what, that team is becoming pretty mature. They can continue to improve their own system without my help every day. So at that point, Dave said, guys, we just achieved some pretty significant result. There are other teams out there who need help. I will go work with them. You continue your own improvement. And so the team did. By October 2015, the team had cut down their lead time in half again for a total improvement of over 80%. What do you think a result like that did to convince people outside of software development that agility could be useful to them too? It was amazing, right? Because up until that point, every team said, yeah, Agile's great for the software developers, but we're different. That convinced a lot of people. So depth first, not breadth. It's very difficult to walk everybody in lockstep at large numbers. We've gone through lots of evolution over the last 4 years, as you can imagine, after all these changes. So 2 kinds of changes. One is organizational changes. Once upon a time, we were a collection of individuals at the company. Somebody would create a project, make a big circle on the map around all the people needed, and flock them to that project, and then disband later on, and so forth. Nowadays, we formed in squads, small teams, call it 4 to 10, 12 people. Over time, we've noticed that several teams worked in the same domain. They all sort of took care of the same part of the business. We formed them in tribes, a collection of squads. Nowadays, when we go pursue some big, high-level strategic initiatives, we bring these tribes together and we say, hey, your job right now is to go in and tackle that challenge. Very important, big, high-level strategic initiative. And we've done all of this using some of the attributes of servant leadership and the Agile mindset, where our teams and our tribes are doing this through self-organization by and large. We remember how Noel explained how people get to have a voice in which teams they want to be on. A lot of people now have a voice into what project they want to work on. That's pretty cool too. And we even have some experiments within the company of teams who aspire to self-manage, teams that have no managers. And I should know because I have 2 teams like that. And the Agile Coaches is one of them. And I'll tell you, as a leader, it's pretty scary, but it has been amazing the kind of results that he have achieved when I got out of the way. So, a personal lesson for me. As you can imagine, another way in which our organization has evolved is through roles. So lots of changes there. You're probably familiar with a bunch, but let me mention a few. Of course, our makers, these are the people who do stuff, right? Not the administrators like me, but hands-on keyboard type people. They've developed a broader skill set so that they may better collaborate with one another. The role of product owner was introduced, right? The person who is responsible to talk to customers, prioritize the requirement, and make sure that the teams have a compelling purpose. Facilitators, I mentioned, Scrum Masters, a role has emerged, became formalized. other roles have declined a little bit in popularity. We have far fewer project managers than we once did. Many of them picked up one of those new roles. And needless to say, a lot of our managers now are expected to behave like servant leaders, as Antonio so eloquently explained. None of this happened overnight. None of this was done by decree one time through a process change. This came through 4 years of constant transformation, and I know that we are not done just yet. We talked about, Mario described the concept of an enterprise Kanban board. I wanted to show you an example. This is ours. This is how we manage the high-level strategic initiatives in the company now. Really fancy, right? Yeah. Sophisticated tool, yeah? Not so much. And that's on purpose. What you're looking at here, and it's taken far away so that you can't read all of our trade secrets. What you're looking at are big pieces of very light cardboard with painter's tape and big post-it notes. And that describes at a high level our top strategic initiatives, those things that once upon a time used to take 18 to 30 months to flow through our value stream, right? To turn from ideas into customer value. And one of the reasons that we use materials like that at the moment is because we change it so much. As we learn and get better and figure out what the impediments are, we want to continue to tweak it. If the whole thing was anchored into sophisticated digital systems, then it would be super costly to change, and maybe we would become more resistant to doing so. So it's very deliberate on our part. All right. I can see some of you are like, all right. Okay, Vistaprint's awesome. You did a great job, blah, 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 right? But what did you achieve? Well, I think that's a fair question. Did we actually change anything after 4 years of effort and all those people and all that change? So remember where we started. 2013, the company had grown a lot, but we had the feeling that we slowed down. We measured, and we found that indeed we weren't as fast as we wanted. So now I'm going to show you a number. That number is going to be surprising to some of you. Remember this. We have not transformed a whole company yet. We're far from done. We have used an incremental approach to be very targeted as to where we put our energy. So those places where we have invested, where we've educated the people, where we've worked with the teams, where the leaders had the courage for change, and where we did a lot of experiments, those value streams, the same ones where we had measured the 18 to 30 months, those where we've invested, we can now turn ideas into customer value in 3 weeks. And we are amazed at that, and we want a lot more. So, of course, the feeling around that is big smile, right? And we hope to have the chance to continue to transform the rest of the enterprise. I'm sharing this because I want to instill some hope in some of you, because a transformation is hard. It's a lot of work, and it doesn't happen in a straight line. There's some zigs and some zags, a couple of steps forward, a step back, 2 steps forward, and a step sideways. Stick with it and see if you can gain some inspiration from how we applied incrementality and the Agile mindset to our own transformation. On this note, I think we are doing well on time. I'd like to see if you have any questions about what we just talked about. Je parle français. Feel free to ask your questions in English or in French if you're more comfortable, and I'll reply in English, if that's okay. Please. And
my question is more about the organization, the different organizations that you showed within the slides. Is it possible to provide more details about the managed, self-managed? Is it the right concept?
Pardon me, about the manager?
the self-managed.
Self-management.
Self-management. Yeah, self-management.
Sure, I can say a few words conceptually, and then if you're interested in concrete examples of those few teams who are experimenting with it, then maybe we can talk more details a bit later. But with my teams, and I'll speak about my own experience, who are attempting to self-manage, we sat down and we talked about what are all the services that I as a manager provide my team. There are some basic items, like I approve budgets and I say yes to vacation requests, and if something terrible happens, they call me. There are other things that I do. I help with performance reviews and I help with hiring, and if there's some trouble in the team, sometimes I jump in and I help. And we took that long list, and then I asked them, actually they asked me, hey JP, could we do that instead of you? And so we've broken it down in roles, and the team members each have elected to grabbing on to 1, 2, or 3 services each, so that they now collectively play that role for one another. Don't get me wrong, it's been interesting at times, and we are learning. There are some things that I used to do that I never voiced before, so I didn't know I had that expectations. And some of the team members, they're becoming more proficient at some of these roles, but it's been a huge learning experience. Please. Hold on, the microphone is coming for you.
Je vais parler en français. Comment a été créée cette approche agile? Est-ce que c'est vous l'utilisez? J'imagine beaucoup d'autres sociétés le font. Comment ça a été créé? Voilà, merci.
So how did we create our agile approach? Is it unique to Vistaprint? I can imagine a lot of other companies use it. How did you go about it? Well, between the coaches, the scrum masters, the champions, the executives, we do a lot of research and education. And we use terms like squads and tribes. For some of you, that'll sound familiar. And it is, because we will shamelessly borrow the best ideas from wherever we can find them. So we go to a lot of conferences, we read a lot of books, we talk to a lot of people, and we will borrow the best ideas that we think can fit in our culture. I had to summarize for you today 4+ years of transformation into the span of 30 minutes. So it's, sanitized a little bit. The reality is complex and messy, right? As you can imagine. But yes, so we have borrowed from the best thinkers out there, and it's in that spirit that we want to give back. Just in case if it can help one person here in the room, it would have been worth it for us. Other questions? Please.
Okay. My question is about the example you give about this team that cut their lead time to 83%. Can you give us an example of what they changed to have this huge result?
Oh my God, they changed so many things, but I can
Only
give
one
you
example. Yes.
Okay, well, at least a couple, I think, to illustrate. So first, the tendency is to look at the people with hands on keyboard. Go faster, right? But it's not a typing issue, it's a thinking issue. And so once upon a time, the designers thought that only one designer could work on a design. They thought, well, software you can collaborate and have more people thinking, but not in design, until they tried it. And then guess what? If you have 2 or 3 designers putting their thoughts together, they can get to the outcome faster. So really shrink the number of days. But one of the biggest changes that they made was not in the doers per se, it was in the managers. There was a bit of a trust issue in this team, where the line manager wanted to review the designs, and then once they were approved by the line manager, then they would be passed on to the senior manager, who would then review and approve, sometimes provide some feedback. And once that was good, then the campaigns would pass to the director, who would then also look at them, provide some comments. Just put yourself in the shoes of the people doing the work, either the translation, the graphics, the text, and so forth. So many different rounds of feedback with different personal opinions and taste. And every time they get changes, they have to go through their whole process all over again. And so through some servant leadership mindset, through some courageous risk-taking, some of the managers decided to delegate that review down to the team and say, all right, let's cross our fingers. We're going to try a few email campaigns where we are not going to look and see what happens. And then it was fine, because we employ highly educated professional people who, when they go home at night, they can handle buying a car, buying a house, raising kids. They can handle email. Yes, out back, please.
Thank you. So I think Agile is cool and all the principles are positive, and we're all, I don't know if we're all working in an Agile environment, but you didn't talk about the limits of those principles. If there is there any plan B or alternatives that you are putting in mind? That's it.
Yeah, that's a great question, right? What are the limits of agility, if any? And what if it doesn't work? What do you do then? Well, I have a few different answers to that, and some of them I can only speak in private because they're colorful. But there's always status quo as an option. If you're satisfied with the speed of value delivery through your enterprise and you feel that it's a great environment to work in and things are okay, maybe agility is not for you just yet. But we had dissatisfaction. We were hoping for something better. And so that gave us the willingness to try and to put up with some risk. You know, an old mentor of mine used to say, agility in itself doesn't fix anything. But the one thing it does extremely well is to show you the problems that the organization already suffers from. And I agree with that it does a great job at showing the problems. Then it's up to the people to decide whether or not to tackle the problems. If there is a risk, if there is a limit, it's trying to do too much too fast. Or it is trying to do with an incomplete understanding. Mario did an excellent job walking people through the values and principles. If somebody only tries to apply the method, it usually does not work. There is a fantastic case study out there from years and years ago in the automotive industry, when Toyota invited, I think GM it was, to come to Japan and look at their plants, because GM was trying to figure out how do they build automobiles with so few defects when we cannot. And so they worked with them for months and months, not just the executives, but the whole team, dozens of people for months in Japan, building relationships like Antonio did with us, right? Spending a lot of time getting to know us and us knowing him. They did all of that, and he transformed one plant, and it became by far the highest performing plant at GM, the NUMI plant. Then GM was like, wow, we want that everywhere. So they asked the VP, fly to the plant in NUMI, take pictures of everything, and then replicate that elsewhere. And so they did. Everything they could see, every sign, every machine, they copied all the physicality of it. And they brought it to a different plant, and it was an absolute disaster. Because right now, you might not be satisfied with your environment, but it's probably controlled chaos, or at least it's a devil you know. I shouldn't say it's chaos. I'm sure your company is perfectly fine, but it's the devil you know. At least you understand the problem, and people have decided to live with them. If you just change for change's sake, it could get temporarily worse, right? So if you're interested in understanding what happens when people merely copy the practices without having the mindset, go to your favorite search engine and search for GM NUMI plant. That'll be fantastic. Great read. Thank you for that awesome question. Is it time?
Maybe one more question.
One more question, so we can. Sir, please.
So when we talk about, or when we think about agility and Scrum, we think of it mostly in a technical customer context. You thought also about Agile and Scrum in corporate context, like HR or marketing. So this is something I cannot imagine. So I come from a technical context, so that's why. And mostly, I think these parts of the enterprises have also problems of lead time and such things, but not a lot of them think about agility. They mostly they put it in technical teams, but nobody thinks of it. At least in Tunisia, I'm talking here.
Yes, and
in
what
such
is the
context.
question?
So how can you give us examples of how did you manage to do it in HR context, marketing? How can you
Right.
apply it there?
Okay. Let me see if I got that right. So do we have examples of agility applied to non-technology? So I gave you one example with the team that produces emails, right? Those are graphic designers, copywriters, translators, operational people, marketers, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole bunch. So not software development per se. It's following the method. It's what is your value stream? Where do your ideas come from? Who is the customer? And then applying the agile mindset. It's really as simple and yet as hard as that. And we do have teams now in all departments using agility. Now, just to be clear, I never confuse agility with Scrum. Scrum is one embodiment of agility. Not all teams at Vistaprint use Scrum. Many use Kanban, many use a hybrid model. It doesn't matter. I will welcome them all so long as we get to better business outcomes. And I would be happy to give you more concrete examples right afterwards, because now I'm told I need to get off the stage. Thank you very much. You've been awesome.
Thank you very much, JP.